Hi everybody, it's ProbablyRed. We're at the final part of the three-part series for Icaria Rising, the Mono Shadow deck. We're at Tech the Deck. So today I'm just gonna go with a brief rundown. I guess like not necessarily brief. It's gonna be brief, but it's going to be complete. So we're just gonna jump right in. Let's start out. Bloodseeker. It is really good one cost and expedition. Now we don't have very much, if any, synergy like that can get it the +2/+2. Sometimes, occasionally, the game does go late. It makes it less of a dead draw. It's very rare. The game has to go really late for it to happen. This can become a 4/5 sometimes for one, which makes it competitive. It makes it like still stand a chance way late in the game. The main reason we run it though is because it's a one cost. The huge disadvantage that it brings to the table, though, is that if we're up against aggro, we are getting pinged every turn, and it's not the only card that does that. We also have Impending Doom, which is pinging us, so we have to get some of that life gain going on through the Condemn. And I think that's and then Aramont gives us a little bit of sustain, and then of course the emblems. We're running 3 out of 4. They also ping us. So there is a lot of life loss in the deck that's going on. But overall, I would say the deck is defensive enough for like a mid-rangey aggro deck to not worry too much about the disadvantages of the pinging. And a 2/3 body for 1. I mean, it's a bold adventure stat line, and usually that's what it ends up being, is just a bold adventure that you can get up turn 1. The reason it's solid is because the only other thing we're doing on turn 1 is using Condemn. Sometimes we get a really good Condemn play where we hit them with something, get rid of a card that's like a Wrath of Caiaphas or a Icaria that we just aren't going to play forever, and then maybe get a kill spell. Or in like a real emergency situation, we can, like, if we do swap out one of those big cards, we aren't swapping out a sigil. We can actually get Seek Power to get a sigil, like we're kind of sparse on sigils versus flooded. So let's move on to the next card. Yeah, Bloodseeker's pretty simple, and I also kind of mentioned Condemn. I'll probably go into it a little bit more in a second. But yeah, those are our 1-drops. Let's go to Blightmoth. Blightmoth, I totally, when I first saw this card, I was like, okay, cool, jank, and then go on. But since I've played it, since like this was it didn't come in the most recent. It wasn't Shadow Spire. It was Whispers of the WOTT. Whispers of the, man, I can't even remember the set. They're coming out so fast, I don't even know. I want to say Whispers of the Throne. Yeah, Whispers of the Throne. So this came out Whispers of the Throne, the mini set before the last. And it's really good against like tribal units. Like if your opponent just happens to be, because of Expedition, like it just sometimes happens that if you're in a faction, especially monofaction or even 2 factions smashed together, you're going to be running some of the same unit types. You're going to be just, and Strangers is a good example where you just get some extra value. This being a 2-drop, 1/2, and the double shadow doesn't matter at all. Flyer, okay, that's okay body. That's a what is the 1-cost 1/2 flyer in Primal? It's the same stat line as that. The Serpent, I can't remember, but it's that. You pay 1 extra more, -1/-1 with the Corrupted 3. The Corrupted 3 is pretty good too. It comes up, I use it a lot. Pay 3 to do this effect again is alright. And then if you can get it to be -2/-2, like spread across 2 units, that's gold. Like that makes the card so good. And it's just like attacks a certain archetype with just 4 slots in your deck. That gives a little bit of push damage and some flying chump blocking against dragons. Against dragons, it's just crazy. Alright, so Dizo, 3-cost 1/4. At first, I was like expecting this thing to be insane. I'm not saying it's not. At first, I was expecting it to be insane, and I was like, oh gosh, it costs 4 to just take a one attack unit. So I don't know about this. I put in some. I kind of stuffed this deck with ways to get power, like a little bit more, so it's a little bit easier, and it's been helping. Like this card's grown in value. I think the more control oriented or the slower pace, like the higher your deck goes, like you should treat this cost like a 4-cost card at minimum, like maybe 5 costs. Because I mean, a 3-cost 1/4 unblockable is fine. You can drop him, but you really want to wait for this to be a kill spell. And where the other bad part of this card was that surprised me, because I didn't really think about it. Just reading the card, you don't think about certain things. When this card dies, you're losing like a good amount. You're losing your unit you played, and they're getting their unit back. And that can really hurt. Like that can surprise you out of nowhere, because it's instant. Like they can attack with that unit that turn if you haven't attacked with it. So like if you're on the defensive, it can be really bad to lose a Dezo. And this deck has no way of protecting your Dezo. So it can be pretty bad. It makes me almost wonder if I should run Immortalize, like just to be able to bring him back, and then like have him get, like, if they do kill it, he gets the Exalt that gives something unblockable. That could be pretty good. But he's got a lot of power to him. He's definitely a strong card, but he's very risky to play. Kuro, I've been trying to run Kuro forever. I ran this before I recorded, actually, before I started, like it was back when Flames of Zolta, like, and this set was like what made up most of Expedition. And it was pretty decent back then. A 3-cost 3/3 with quick draw, that's good. The rest doesn't come up too often. If you get him in Mastery 6 a little bit later in the game, like he gets better at in the middle to late part of the game. He gets really good. Kind of like Dezo. He's similar to Dezo in that playing him early, like usually they'll just like they'll just try to progress the board instead of trying to kill your units, because they know you're just going to draw them back if they can't remove him in particular, or they don't want to remove him in particular because he's like not as high priority as progressing their board, like as opposed to like if they were gonna kill an Impending Doom, they'd be like, oh, I'm killing the Impending Doom. Oh, you got Kuro out. I don't want to mess with that, so I'm gonna try to progress the board instead of using kill spells, because if they don't have 2, they can't get rid of the Kuro, and they're not gonna waste that on the Kuro. You know, like that's kind of what he says. Curses are fast. So far I have never cast a fast curse. This deck doesn't really allow much opportunity for that. Airbot, the only way that he can do that is if he somehow makes it to your hand after he's a curse. I don't even think that's possible. I'm not super sure, but I'm pretty sure it's impossible in this deck to get him back in your hand as a relic, as a curse relic. And then Unkindness, which, I mean, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty nice little mini synergy with him. Other than that, it doesn't come up. Aramont, I love this promo. Man, when this promo came out, I was so excited. I was like, dude, this is cool. And it's one of the big pushes to play Mono Shadow, which is great that they came out with Aramont, Mind Splinter, and then right after that went into Icaria First Reaper. Like, they just like pumped Mono Shadow full of value. And then Dezo came out with Icaria, and that was just even better. So like Mono Shadow's gotten lately a lot of buffs, and I'm running this kind of experimentally. I think it's a pretty solid little card here. And it's like that or Vara's not Vara's Intervention, Vara's Favor. So it's like Favor of Kaifas, kind of, I think is what it would be similar to, with the potential upside to just fill your hand up against like a control deck. Like if they don't really care, like if they already have a bunch of cards and you're like, well, I'm way behind, but I'm kind of playing the aggressor here as the aggro mid-range, then Wrath of Kaifas can be solid. This is a really power hungry deck, even though it might not look like it is very power hungry. And this just like gives you a little bit of sustain, counteracts your Impending Doom, Bloodseeker life loss, your Emblem life loss, and it is great in the air, trades with dragons, and pushes a lot of damage, like a lot of damage. It's like, it feels like a 5/5 with deadly flying, because it's that ping. Like usually they'll play a sigil and then maybe another card on an average turn. Sometimes you'll get a little bit more. They forget that he's even on them, and then sometimes they'll just like not do anything until they can find an answer, and then they'll play that and get rid of him. But so he's a little bit more vulnerable because there's 2 types that can kill him, but he kind of saves that because he has to be dealt at fast speed unless you're destroying him with relic removal. So kind of a weird feel. It feels like, oh man, they got me like that. That opens up to more spells, but actually he's also closed off in certain ways. So really solid card. I think he's definitely a good pushed reason to run Mono Shadow. Impending Doom has stayed the course as one of the cards that's just super solid since the first set. This card has blown me away. Like awesome card. Great early craft. It's been in the format for a while. It's not so much used in Throne that I've seen. Like I'm sure there's decks that use it, but it is super impressive to be an Expedition. 4 cost 5/5 flying, great. The ping, this deck can kind of handle it, but it just like gives it the theme of like, okay, we're playing pretty solid units. The lowest, I mean, we got a 2-drop that's kind of weak stat line, but Bloodseeker, even the 1 cost, is pretty solid. There's not too much to it other than it pushes, and it's kind of a defensive unit if it has to be. Like you can be taking 1 damage and still be netting defensive play just because it can block bigger stuff or prevent attacks. One thing that Shadow, and in this deck it's kind of insinuated, it's not good at board stalls, but it can definitely hold its own against time if you have a way to sustain. Incarnus, I only own 2. That's what I'm running 2. I don't know if running 4 would be better, but I'm sure it is. I've seen like lists on Warcry that run 4 that are Mono Shadow. So you have 4 and you're missing something else through the list. Definitely could try to replace it and do some experimenting with that. But Incarnus, when I get an Incarnus, it just feels awesome. 4 cost 3/2 unblockable is just a solid rate right there. Then it replaces herself. Like she's just great. The Invoke Shadow can be insane. And then Mastery 9 doesn't really come up that often, but if it does, that is so much value. You can just win the game off of that. 6/5 unblockable with no downside is ridiculous. The hardest part about running her is she does die to almost any burn until the Mastery is triggered. But even then, that Invoke kind of makes it just worth it. You can get some garbage cards, but like off of the Invoke, but you can also get amazing cards, and that'll balance out. Like you get maybe like every 10 games you'll get like 3 cards that are just like kind of meh, but you'll still get something playable. But most of the time you just get at least 1 amazing card, if not 2, to choose from. Really solid ability in Invoke Shadow, and on this card it's just crazy. Okay, so here we go. The star of the show. Surprisingly, haven't gotten to play Icaria First Reaper a lot onto the battlefield. But every time she hits the battlefield, this card is devastating. Like 5/5 flying deadly. Feels like Aramot to some extent, but just a little bit more push. At least like consistent. Like your opponent doesn't get to decide how much damage they take. You just deal the damage. And the killing an enemy unit or site on entry, never killed a site with it yet, but I'm sure I will in time. Maybe a time site at that. But killing enemy unit comes up, like they have an enemy unit, and if they don't, they're in trouble anyways because this deck is pretty aggressive. But this thing is crazy, just pow, and then keep swinging. I'm trying to like, Makar Stranger is solid, but this card, this doesn't pilfer, but this card is just boom, hits the board, pow, and the flying is just really what really kicks it. The Entomb also is one of those, like it's just more text on this card that has the potential to do stuff, which makes it great. I really think this card is solid. Really solid, and it's fun. That's another thing. And you might be like, wow, there's no 5 costs. Well, Dizo is your 5 cost, taking cards with 2 attack. Like, that's what he does. So Dizo can definitely play like more, like this deck is actually, like it looks like it's very high on 3s, but it's about even. Because some of this goes to the 5s. And then on to the attachments. Unkindness. I've had this thing go off so often. Like, if sometimes it'll sit on the board for 3 turns not doing anything. But this card can be fantastic. Getting your 3 1/1 flyers just totally turns the tide of the game. I've had a I don't know if I've got it on camera, but I've had a board cleared once, and that did hurt. But still, you're paying 2 costs for a relic to get 3 1/1s. And if they trade a board clear for that, like I think it was Reverberating Strike, I don't know, like, because I have run this in Throne, or a similar version in Throne, but it just wasn't effective enough to make a triple T off of. I like the Expedition version better, so that's why I did this. Yeah. Unkindness is, it just seems like kind of swingy, kind of relying on chance too much, hoping your opponent is going to unit. But I feel like I'm pretty heavy on units, and Expedition is kind of heavy on units, but still, like, your competition will miss eventually, and if not, like, they're not going to be hitting your other 30 units that you've been playing. It means, like, it's really rare for them to be able to use their removal and play a unit, so they have to choose, and it kind of forces them in the choice of inaction. Beast Caller's Amulet has been a very pleasant surprise. 3 costs, +1 attack weapon. That summons a 5/5 beast. I've summoned so many 5/5 beasts with this deck. It feels awesome too. 3 cost 5/5 is amazing. Doesn't have the evasion the Pending Doom has, and it is a little bit riskier than the Pending Doom. But it's the +1 attack isn't nothing. Like, it's like a little bit of push. It's like the ping off of Condemn, plus like a little bit of risk and a 5/5. With Dizo in this deck and a great amount of flying, like, this deck hits it. And then a Karnas too, like, you just get it. Another alternative I've seen, I saw on Locopojo, and let me look it up. I think it's Makar's Quiver. I might actually have it in, no I don't, because they're 1 costs. It's not Quiver, it's Longbow. Might be Unseen Longbow. Make sure we're in Expedition mode. Yeah, Unseen Longbow. I've seen Locopojo has used this in conjunction with the Beast Caller's Amulet to kind of have a little bit more of a push towards the weapon and unblockable synergy, which is perfectly fine. But Beast Caller Amulet I've been happy with. It's a solid little uncommon that just does it. Next, spells. Condemn. I was kind of skeptical on crafting them, but I ended up, like, saying, okay, I'm doing a test the deck. Let's crack into them and finally build our 4th Condemn. Worth it. I like Condemn. Like, it doesn't seem like much. Feel like there's I forgot what the darn card's called, but the primal version of this that does 2 to face and gives you an Aegis. People really hate on that, and Condemn seems to be a lot more popular. It goes to the face a lot, but the lifesteal doesn't matter. It's just a little tiny bit of sustain. If a unit dies that gets hit by this, gets void bound, can come up, and it's fast. So if you're playing something that you don't want to see get recurred, you can do that. And the 1 cost options for Shadow have been awesome. Seek Power is great, just like being able to get Seek Power. You can also get a chant, which is cool. Avoid Death, I haven't used yet. It and Makar have used a good bit. I really like this. As far as Intervention, it's, I don't even know if I'm running any Unseen. Pretty sure I'm not, but that would be pretty cool if I was. Other than that, it's the card that gives Unblockable that I wanted to use, because the other mode on it is a -2. So, like, if you pull it and then something happens, you're like, emergency, gotta kill something, and you don't, you're at, like, because they ambush in a unit or something. It's not a fast spell, so. But anyways, so that's something. And then Xenon Light Speaker I played once. Basically what I'm doing here with the Xenon Light Speaker might seem like a weird choice, but it just gives you ability to like have in your market a unit that could be a 4/4. And the lifesteal is nothing. Like, it can be pretty solid. People run this main board in some Shadow decks. And that's another way to get sustain. The Condemn gives you that little burst, and then the Zen Life Speaker, you draw some units, hopefully, and then get lifesteal on them. make this, if you could pay, if you get to that that 4 next turn, make it a 4/4. Like that's out of your limitations of 1 cost, and you got a 4/4. That's perfect. And then 3 emblems of Bakar. Oh, I skipped a couple cards, didn't I? I got busy explaining the market, but there's the market. Devouring Shadow. Okay, here's reason number 3, other than Shadow being great, to be playing Mono Shadow, because this thing could be -5, like, or more sometimes. Like, it's just so good. I love this card. The fact that it's permanent minus, it can really come up. Yeah, that's not too much to say about this card. It's not fast, but it is. Like, it comes down early. Like, I know that sounds contradictory, but I'm saying it's not a fast spell. It's a slow spell, but it is early. Like, it comes out. And then Wrath of Caiaphas is kind of experimental for me. I think it's a really interesting, very fascinating card. And I haven't gotten to draw 7 off of it. And I have used it a couple times to get a random sigil, which is a shadow sigil in this deck. So it's not too different than the it hasn't been too different than the Vara's Favor, but what really changes is you don't get that ping, and that has been pretty impactful. So if you don't want to run Wrath of Caiaphas, I could totally understand if you went with Favor instead. I run so much stuff like in here that just gives you an ability to get more without having to run more than 25 power. Like, you have a lot of access to power. And then I'm running the 3 emblems and the 22 shadow sigils. That's it. Overall, really love the deck. This has been one of the better Triple T decks. Like, I try to run experimental stuff. I got it kind of inspired by Locopojo to build a Mono Shadow in kind of my own way with what collection I have, because I'm running on the ladder. I might as well do a Triple T on it. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks for coming down and seeing the deck tech to the video for my Triple T. If you haven't seen the other parts of the Triple T, the try the deck and the test the deck, I really highly recommend you go see those. If you like to watch the deck tech first, that's totally cool. I try not to provide too many spoilers, like for how the games went, but man, they were a blast. You really need to go see those if you haven't already. And if you have, thank you so much. Have a great night.